This is the podcast.
Let me talk to you. So, what do you guys want to talk about?
Such good shit.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Yeah, I've officially determined now. YouTube is 100% shadow banning this channel. There's absolutely no other explanation as to how my viewership numbers have plummeted over 60% in the last month. For whatever reason, the algorithms just aren't showing my content to other people's feeds. So I don't know what to do at this point. I'm very much at a crossroads. Do I continue to upload the podcast to YouTube and just hope that things will magically turn around? Or do I say screw it and upload everything exclusively to Rumble? Which is what I've been contemplating for a while. I don't know. I mean, it's not just affecting the channel in terms of outreach. It's basically flatlined my ability to even gain subscribers. It's incredibly frustrating. I'm legitimately, super bent out of shape over this. I mean, I've had periods of channel stagnation in the past few years, but nothing like what I've been seeing throughout the month of July. Maybe it's because of summer. But everybody's on the internet now. So I can't even say it's people on vacation, just not even surfing the internet or binge watching YouTube content. Everybody does that now. I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's getting harder. I'm going to give it a go for another month and see if anything changes. If by the end of August the numbers don't seem to turn around any, or I don't see anything promising in terms of new subscriptions or click-through rate, I'm just going to go with Rumble full time. At least the people that follow my content there are consistent. I've seen a bit of a dip there too in viewership, but it's not even comparable to what YouTube's done. They've completely napalmed this channel. So YouTube, as Steven Crowder would say, piss off. Go fondle yourselves with a wire brush. Y'all can think whatever you want. I'm bitter, resentful. You're daggone right I'm bitter and resentful. I worked my butt off for the past 4 years trying to build this channel from scratch. And now, all of a sudden, YouTube's trying to cut the cord now that my channel's actually getting a little bit of notoriety in 2026. A few months ago, I was averaging 3 to 5 subscribers a month. In July, I think I gained 1. I have every right to be bitter about the whole situation, especially when it's not me that's the root of the problem. I haven't changed a thing about how I do things on this channel. Still the same 5 Starr Wrestling Report it's been since the summer of 2021. Yeah, I might have grown a few wrinkles since then, as we all do as we age. I've just had it up to here with all this shadow banning horse crap that YouTube pulls. They've done it to all the great podcasters and people I would consider knowledgeable intellects. It was especially atrocious during the COVID era. People forget about that. Couldn't even have conversations about the beer bug before all the quote-unquote news started covering things. You know, things that people were already implying before, and you couldn't talk about that stuff because the experts had not clarified it yet. Even though people are smarter than them, and, well, never mind. But they used to do it with people that mattered. Now they're even doing it with bums like me that are scraping the bottom of the barrel just trying to get a little bit of recognition. Yeah, you probably didn't expect me to start by cutting a promo here, but what can I say? I'm hot. As I noted last week, this will be the final FSWR podcast until probably the first week of September. I'll be away on business a few weeks, so I won't be around to either record or watch anything on the channel for the time being. It's been a while since I've taken a full break from doing this. Maybe it's for the better, especially with how things have gone in my personal life as of late. But we'll go ahead and get this Raw report done. We've got a Sunday morning call today, so don't have a ton of time to be spending ranting about this one. All things considered, I did not have a ton to complain about this week, outside the usual bad booking. All right, here we go. Our final Retro Raw coverage for, like I said, at least a couple weeks. Last week we did the SummerSlam pay-per-view, so we didn't talk about the following night's Raw where they had Sergeant Slaughter revealed as a new commissioner. The one comment that I had about that opening video package: am I the only one that forgot about Shawn Michaels physically abusing Vince McMahon live on air? I'm not kidding you, that actually happened. Vince tried to clarify that Shawn and Bret were in cahoots, based on what we saw go down at the pay-per-view. By the way, yes, they are officially breaking out the cahoots terminology. Get ready to hear that shoved down your throat over the next year and a half. It'll be a drinking game. But see, it wasn't enough for Shawn to basically tell Vince to fuck off. They actually showed him grabbing the mic from Vince and then shoving him out of the ring. And Vince apparently did not take any issue with that. He just calmly went back over to sit at the desk, called the show, let Shawn say his piece. When you think about the evolution of the Vince McMahon character in the next couple years, it's very eye-opening when you go back and look at how much of a pushover he was pre-Montreal. And they're starting to vaguely allude to him being the owner of the company. But we are months away from seeing Vince McMahon, the commentator, become Vincent K. McMahon, the evil billionaire owner, the genetic jackhammer, along with the other crass nicknames. So here we open with Shawn coming out for another promo. Vince again just casually putting him over as a stand-up employee. My first comment about Shawn's appearance was him showing up dressed as a middle-aged dad fresh off the golf course. A green polo shirt with short khakis, above knee level, and loafers. Shawn was definitely an advocate of the loafer look during this time. And, well, for the second straight week, Shawn comes out to do a promo. He begins blistering Vince at the commentary desk like the world's biggest prick. He straight up called him a Nimrod, to which Vince responded by going, well, let's not get personal here. Very calmly trying to play off this raging asshat who's calling boss names and being a complete dick for no reason. And here's the catch. He's mad because Vince didn't give him a courtesy call to let him know that he would be wrestling Mankind in the main event. That is the reason that Shawn came out to tear down his boss on live television. He's mad because Vince didn't inform him that he was in a wrestling match on TV this week. I understand that Sarge is technically the quote-unquote commissioner. But by this point, we know that Vince is the chairman/owner of the WWF. We know that he at least has some pull on this program, especially if he has the authority in booking matches, which is a whole other matter. How is Vince allowing Shawn to talk to him like that? In or out of kayfabe? It's beyond absurd. The idea that Vince would be okay with Shawn venting his frustrations and flat out calling the owner of this fucking company a Nimrod and a moron. I just think, what would Bill Watts have done? Aside from stretching Shawn from asshole to appetite and making him suck his own foot. So after calling out Vince and then Sarge, particularly noting Sarge's abnormally gargantuan chin. He did have a big fucking chin. I'll give Shawn that. Well, we get Sarge coming out to quote-unquote put Shawn in his place. Without getting too bogged down on the particulars here, basically told Shawn that he doesn't appreciate his attitude problems. And tonight it's put up and shut up time for Shawn. And he did this while Shawn kept selling like Sarge was spitting in his face constantly. Which he may have been doing. I don't know. It wasn't in full HD, so couldn't quite tell. And then Shawn told Sarge that he has an insurance policy waiting in the wings tonight because he's always planning ahead of everybody else. And this took about 12 minutes of TV time. All honesty, I have no idea why they devoted so much time to it. They could have easily shaved off about 5 minutes, and I don't think it would have made a difference. We get it. Shawn is a dick. You don't need to beat it into our heads for 12 minutes. I am well aware that he's embracing being a full-fledged heel now, so you can tell he's amping up the assholeism quite a bit. Sometimes it's hard to tell when he's working and when he's not. It is always hard to take a guy seriously when he's dressed in loafers. I think that's my main bone of contention in all this. If you're going to try to be a heel, that's one thing. Can you try to not dress like a tool? That's all I'm saying. So then we had the Road Warriors taking on the Godwins in a country whipping match. Why? because Russo just so happened to stumble across some world-class footage from 1983. And he said, well, if the Freebirds and the Von Erichs can do it, bro, so can these guys. You know, just completely neglecting the fact that the Freebird-Von Erich feud was a super white-hot money-drawing program and one of the most successful rivalries in professional wrestling history. But you know, it's the Roddy Piper Jimmy Snuka coconut effect. Russo remembers Piper hitting Snuka with the coconut on Piper's pit. He just never bothered to take into account the why, how, or what implications of what led up to it. So in a feud that is not so hot and not so successful, the Road Warriors and the Pig Farmers have this artificially contrived country whipping match that got over like a fart in church. Of course, the stipulations here are beyond moronic. Even though it's no disqualification, anything goes, you still had Phineas and Animal standing on the floor for several minutes watching as the other two guys are in the ring doing spots with a strap. Why were they on the floor if it's no DQ? Moreover, a better question would be, why were they on the floor in the first fucking place? Was this not Tornado Rules? I don't know. And then to make matters even dumber, Phineas attacked Animal with the slob bucket. Then he got into the ring so he could help Henry gang up on Hawk. Why did he wait 2 minutes to do that? I don't know. And then Animal gets in the ring and dumps both the Godwins out, which they declared was the only way you win the match. You have to force your opponents out of the ring with both feet touching the floor, even though it was not technically over-the-top rules. So yeah, this absolutely sucked a wet cock. It did not compare to what the Freebirds and the Von Erichs did. This was a Vince Russo WWF-style gimmick match with all the usual overbooked bells and whistles you'd come to expect. Plus, the match only got like 3 minutes, so what the fuck were you expecting? We had Sarge handing Brian Pillman the dress that he was contracted to wear for his match later on. Don't ask me how Sarge obtained the dress. That detail was massively overlooked. And then we had our weekly dose of the WWF Light Heavyweight division as the single biggest waste of time, effort, and money segment. It's Scott Putski versus Tony Williams. No, not the famous jazz drummer Tony Williams. One of my all-time favorite drummers and musicians. I wish it was that Tony Williams. I'd have rather seen a 16-bar drum fill than whatever in the hell this segment was supposed to be. And just to give you the impression of what the WWF thought of all this, they aired the entire match on a picture-in-picture while they showed Brian Pillman in his locker room putting on the dress for his match later on. We learned that Goldust and Marlena had placed a secret hidden camera in Pillman's locker room to capture all this footage, because that isn't totally illegal. And in fact, the announcers called them out on this. They go, "Isn't that a blatant exploit of privacy?" Marlena responds with, "No, potentially, yeah." At least she's honest. Oh, and by the way, this picture-in-picture, it was one of those captures where the Pillman footage took up about 3/4 of the screen, and in the lower right-hand corner, you could barely make out what was going on in the ring with Putski and Williams. So they absolutely did not give this match the time of day. nor should they have. Which lends the question of why they even aired the match in the first fucking place. I think Putski won. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. I was more so trying to figure out how Goldust and Marlena are supposed to be the babyfaces here. They spiked Brian Pillman's locker room with a hidden camera, admitted to a crime on national cable network television. We're supposed to cheer these two? Yeah, having a hard time buying that one. Then we had Brian Pillman versus Flash Funk. Right before the break, Sarge came out and made Goldust and Marlena leave ringside. At first I was thinking, oh, so they're going to be arrested for bugging Pillman's locker room, right? Nah, as it turns out, last week they were at ringside during Pillman's match, flashing lingerie and just being a nuisance. So I guess Sarge wanted to make sure we got a clean professional wrestling bout this week. I say this as I'm about to review a match involving Brian Pillman in a fucking dress. We did have someone bringing a sign that made fun of Pillman for looking like a drag queen. I think the more appropriate term in this case would be cross-dresser, right? Which I believe is technically different from a drag queen, at least in the traditional sense. Although these days it's hard to tell. I try to look the other way and not draw attention to it. We had the announcers plug in the upcoming ECW pay-per-view during this segment. It was perfect timing too when they mentioned it. Right as somebody in the front row opposite the hard cam held up an ECW sign. Probably saw it and figured, oh shit, may as well plug it now. So Pillman basically has the match won. Then Marlena and Goldust show back up and play the locker room footage on the Jumbotron to distract them. And when Pillman goes to turn around to grab Flash, he gets caught in a small package cradle and pinned. To which Vince's response was, and I quote, "Pillman can't seem to do anything right these days." Yeah. Maybe a bit too soon. In context, I didn't really think about this much until seeing Pillman's reaction here, but it did make sense as to why he was so irate. Because even though everybody in the building had already seen the locker room film of Pillman putting on the dress prior to this match, Pillman was the only one who never saw it. He still not had been clued into the fact that Goldust and Marlena bugged his locker room. So when he saw the tape and realized what was going on, he sold it perfectly. Like, these motherfuckers. Not only did they humiliate me twice in the last 2 weeks, now they're fucking with me behind closed doors. You know, I think I talked about this a little bit with the Goldust Pillman feud. Coming out of the pay-per-view, the whole Pillman having to wear the dress storyline they did on television over a series of weeks, everything about that worked tremendously. It was a great old school storyline that could be over the top and campy without directly insulting people's intelligence. I had no issues with that. The problem was everything that came after they did all the dress stuff. Then it just became a Russo-infested nightmare with all the sex scandal crap and Marlena having to serve as Pillman's assistant. I think that was all stuff that tied in with the stipulation match for Ground Zero. They had the germ of a great idea here, Unfortunately, it ended up devolving into the typical Russo recipe of women hating and sexual degradation. Because you all know Russo had a fetish for that twisted BS. His BDSM porn obsession becoming magnified on TV for public consumption. What a weirdo. From there, they had a highlight package of all the stuff that went down last week between Steve Austin and Owen Hart, including Owen referring to Austin as a crippled freak multiple times during his promo. It got funnier each time. Just as I remember being the case, the night after Austin was dropped on his neck and suffered a severe injury that nearly ended his career, here he was, back on Raw the following night, getting into a physical angle with Owen and the Hart Foundation. He ended up coming down to cost Owen a match with Dude Love in the main event. And even though Austin wasn't on the brunt of the attack, it's still mind-boggling to think that they had this guy back on TV the night after the pay-per-view doing angles. That is just... words can't even begin to describe it. Beyond it being incredibly stupid and narrow-minded. Keep in mind, too, as of this point, Austin is out of action with a broken neck for an indefinite period of time. He is still currently one half of the World Tag Team Champions with Dude Love, and I believe is still recognized as the current reigning Intercontinental Champion. And here's the kicker. They are currently in the process of building to a 4-way match for the tag titles, wherein the assumption is that Austin will somehow be involved in that match. Dude Love is not concerned about this, even though he knows that Austin has a broken neck. He's going into this thing thinking, we got it totally under control. This was how desperate they were in the ratings war. They knew that Austin was their meal ticket. He was their bread and butter. Broken neck be damned, son. That guy's going to be on television as much as possible, whether he's healthy or not. As long as it guarantees us that we stay remotely competitive in the ratings. And the scary part is how true that ended up being. Especially by this point in 1997, as the WWF was slowly closing that gap with WCW. Yeah, they still had about 5 or 6 months before things finally turned in the other direction. But we're talking within a 1 or 1.5 point ratio by this point. As opposed to Nitro having a 2 or 3 point lead over Raw in the ratings like they had for most of 96 and early 97. And you can say it was because of this, that, and the other thing. It was because of Austin. He was the guy that people were primarily switching channels to come over and watch. It wasn't because of Shawn. It wasn't because of any of the horse crap going on in mid-card purgatory. It was Austin. He was the guy people were tuning in to check out. Even at the expense of his own well-being during recovery, they were going to make sure that guy was plastered all over this fucking show as much as possible. So you can't say the method didn't work. Was it a smart business move? Yeah. Debatable. So we get Dude Love coming out at the top of the hour to cut a promo. I wrote very little down about it aside from him talking about Austin's recovery and briefly touching on the four-way involving the tag titles. And eventually Shawn appeared on the big screen in a pre-tape to call out Foley's alter egos. In addition to calling him a Nimrod, which apparently is now Shawn's favorite word, he also called Foley an idiot several times over. Said he would shove his foot down Mankind's throat. And then after he left, Dude Love quoted John Lennon. In hindsight, this is a complete filler segment and a waste of 5 minutes. There was next to no point to any of this. They couldn't even be bothered to bring in some decent-looking women to do their stripper dance. They just used two mid-looking 40-year-olds. Bummer. And that took us to Owen Hart and the Bulldog versus the Patriot and Shamrock. My favorite moment on Raw this week, this had me rolling. Patriot's out there waving the American flag during his entrance. So like the perfect scumbag heel, Owen grabs the Canadian flag and begins aggressively waving it back and forth in the Patriot's face. And then Dell just stands there and no-sells it. It's just another classic example of what made Owen Hart an all-time legend, dude. Absolute gem. I'll show this fucker. Oh, by the way, Shamrock was supposed to be the surprise partner here. I don't know why they advertised this as a mystery match. There was no real fanfare for Ken coming out. They just played his music and there he was. I mean, I guess the idea being he had previous beef with Davey from SummerSlam. Unsettled beef. They gave him a huge ovation in Mississippi. Shamrock was massively over this week. Which is something we covered during the SummerSlam recap. When he went batshit and ended up beating up like half the backstage personnel and Bulldog, respectively. It was the angle that instantly made Shamrock a top guy in the WWF. For about 6 months until they dropped the ball, because they never capitalized on his popularity. I will say, they definitely made a massive mistake here by having Shamrock be the babyface in peril. I was like, are you kidding me? You're really having Shamrock sell for the heels when you've got Del fucking Wilkes standing right there? That'd be like Brock Lesnar selling for two heels trying to make a hot tag to Kurt Angle. Completely backwards logic. The action here was still good. Patriot's comeback was fine. Although I still think Shamrock should have been the one running wild at the end. It ends up with Bret coming down to try to run the distraction, but Sarge comes out and creates a blockade. While Tim White's on the floor dealing with Owen and Shamrock, Patriot ends up giving Davey a full Nelson slam on a folding chair for the pin. Technically, Owen brought the chair in first, so I guess turnabout is fair play, if you want to use that argument. I just like the idea that Bret backed down from Sergeant Slaughter of all people. If this were 1984, I can make a valid argument that Bret might have a hard time taking him. In 1997, come on now. Bret could have had that guy in the sharpshooter in 10 seconds if he wanted to. Maybe less. Again, it was fine. Relatively decent tag match that wasn't overbooked to death. Had a clean finish. Mostly. It's almost like they had the capability of doing basic logical booking from time to time. I wish this was the norm for the WWF in the late 90s. Would have saved us a lot of heartache and rage. Then we had my second favorite thing on Raw this week. Canadian fans at the airport cutting heel promos on the American fans and rubbing in Bret's title win in our faces. That's some of the most believable shit out there. The Canadian fans were such marks for Bret Hart that they used his title victory to try to proclaim Canada's superiority to the United States. Just keep dreaming, guys. I do have to concede. When they had the Patriot get blindsided by Bret while he was in the middle of his pro-America promo, I know I wasn't supposed to, but I kind of laughed. They just made him look so dumb. Maybe it was the delivery. Maybe it was how he sold getting attacked by the chair. It just came off very hokey. Which I guess is a good euphemism for Del Wilkes doing the Patriot gimmick in the WWF. Hokey, campy, silly, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. Then we had by far the worst thing on this week's program. Surprise, surprise. It's more of this stupid fucking faction warfare garbage. Before I talk about Farouk versus Chains, I know you're all just dying to hear my input on that stellar 5-star classic. Let's talk about what they aired on the show we missed last week. So the Nation turned on Ahmed and beat him up for reasons that did not look very apparent on first viewing. There was a clip where everybody was in the ring posing, and then from out of the blue, Farouk turned and punched Ahmed's lights out. And the rest of the crew joined in on the attack. So if we are analyzing this timeline accurately, Ahmed Johnson joined the Nation about 2 or 3 months ago, got injured almost immediately, was gone for about a month, came back with no fanfare or announcement, and then immediately got turned on by the rest of the group. Beyond the question of what was the fucking point, let's just call a spade a spade. Ahmed Johnson has to be the biggest loser in WWF history, right? It's one thing to be completely feckless as a talent in real life. The fact that they're not even blatantly trying to hide it anymore. Even in storyline, they are now acknowledging how much of a waste of space this fucker was. I saw that clip and I just started laughing. I'm like, of course the Nation turned on Ahmed for absolutely no discernible reason. Why wouldn't they? Probably figured, well, the guy's been hurt more than he's actually been involved with anything in the group. May as well just cut our ties now and save us all the trouble later on. So you can't entirely say the heels were unjustified. What has Ahmed done for this group? Effectively nothing. He just stood in the backdrop and made the Black Power symbol with his fist. That's all he's done. He's been a body. Maybe my perspective is a bit skewed here. Better yet, perhaps my standards were a bit different in the early 90s. Was Brian Lee better or worse when he was a talent in Smoky Mountain Wrestling? Based on the footage I've ever seen of him in Smoky Mountain, I don't ever recall him being that bad. He wasn't great, but he was passable. He could have a match. He could cut a promo to an extent. Didn't have a personality, but he showed signs of competence. His work in the WWF was the fucking pits. The scary part is that he wasn't even the worst member in the DOA. That's still reserved for the Harris cue balls. But Brian Lee, Chains, whatever you want to call him, he was pretty bad too. The jury's still out on whether he was worse as the Undertaker. I think he was still pretty terrible then too, but this match was no good. Looked like two drunk guys in a bar sleepwalking through spots. They do a very poorly mistimed ref bump at the finish so Rocky Maivia could hit the ring and give Chains the rock bottom. Then after Farouk won, Rocky did the Black Power sign to earn his official coronation as a member of the Nation. So there was in fact a reason for them kicking Ahmed out of the group so quickly. It was to replace him with somebody who had actual skill and potential. So that was a good call. Am I the only one that has no memory of this angle ever taking place? This is how they officially introduced Rock as a member of the Nation of Domination? He made a random cameo during a Farouk Chains match one week? It's pretty lame. The heel turn was absolutely the right call. Everyone's been clamoring for a Rock heel turn for months. The only reason it hadn't escalated recently is because Rock's been off TV with an injury. So I think the people got the bad taste of the Rocky Maivia gimmick out of their mouths. It's just odd to think that this is how Rock was introduced to the group. No real build at all. Just, here's Rocky. He's back. And now he's a heel. Cool. He definitely looked more comfortable as a bad guy on camera. Instead of having to do that force-fed cheesy smile he was doing as Rocky Maivia. This is already a vast improvement. Obviously, we're going to see a great gimmick overhaul as we watch him become The Rock over a period of months. It was not an instant turnaround the minute Rock joined the Nation. But it was most definitely where his career began to turn around for the better. That was followed by Sable coming out to shake her so-called goodies for the camera. If you were into whatever she was showing off at the time. I've been pretty clear on what I thought about Sable's anatomy. Wasn't the biggest fan. Didn't get it. But then the Patriot immediately interrupted and called out Bret for a fight. Enough of this tits and ass parade. Time to get serious. So he and Bret get into an impromptu fight. Of course, it ended up being a setup because the rest of the Hart Foundation came out to help. Pillman was not wearing his dress here, which... Isn't that technically a breach of contract? Wasn't he required to wear a dress on TV until he won another wrestling match? I don't think they ever mentioned anything about him needing to be in an actual scheduled match. I thought it was any time Pillman was on camera. Maybe not. So they're out there ghetto stomping on Dell until Sarge makes his 58th appearance on this one show. He sends all the heels to the back. Agents as well. And for the second straight occurrence on this very show, after we had already seen a heat angle where Bret laid out the Patriot with a chair in the back, we see the Patriot get laid out again. This time courtesy of the entire Hart Foundation. Not to say they were overdoing it with the heat angles or anything, but you know you can spread this out over a few weeks, right, guys? Did we really need to see the challenger for the world title get beaten up twice in the span of 10 minutes? Seems like overkill to me. But what do I know? Then we had our TV main event. Shawn Michaels versus Mankind. Oh, I'm sorry. How silly of me. Forgot to mention this. Baracus is still coming. Yeah. Been waiting almost 20 years for that. He never came. So Shawn Michaels, in addition to cutting promos in full-fledged heel mode, he is now working all of his matches in full-fledged heel mode. Mankind came out with a garbage can to start this match. And it was not one of those aluminum gimmick cans either. No, Mankind had an actual plastic garbage can with him. Now, of course, this wasn't no DQ, so why they were then permitted to do spots with his garbage can in the opening minute? That I couldn't tell you. The best way I can describe the action here is they tried to have a pay-per-view main event caliber match in about 7 or 8 minutes of TV time, including commercials. It was just one flashy high spot after another. Even before the break, we had 2 failed attempts at them trying to break the announcer table. More accurately, 2 failed attempts of Shawn trying to put Mankind through the table. We had Shawn breaking free of the mandible claw on 2 occasions, I believe. One of which involved a counter where Shawn drove Mankind headfirst into the ring post several times, in what easily could have been a concussion angle to write somebody off of TV for months. Here it was just a spot in the match. And during the course of the match, we had 2 layered appearances. The first of which was Triple H and Chyna. They came down to ringside prior to the break spot. And then after the break, we had the WWF return of none other than Shawn's insurance policy, Ravishing Rick Rude. Boy howdy did this fucking guy make an impression for his return. He waffled Mankind with, I think, the hardest chair shot in all of 1997. Right to the top of the guy's skull. I wrote probably Mick Foley's 13th concussion in the WWF this year alone. All these goddamn unprotected chair shots he's been taking lately. Headshots, no less. He wasn't taking him to the back. He was taking him straight to the top of the head. And it only gets more aggravating from here. So Shawn followed that with a sweet chin music for the 3 count. Because naturally the chair shot wasn't enough to keep Foley down. Still had to let Shawn hit his finish. That's where Hunter learned it. And then in one of the more wacky finishes we've seen to a WWF Raw in quite some time, because we needed to make sure we still crammed in 8 minutes worth of content into 30 seconds, after Shawn wins, they cue The Undertaker's music. Taker begins stalking Shawn down the aisleway, only to then get interrupted by Paul Bearer on the big screen, noting that Kane is still coming, that Undertaker will burn in hell as they shoot off flames from the top of the rampway. Never got any follow-up with Hunter and Chyna's involvement. The only clue we got was that Rude was Shawn's insurance policy. And as quickly as they were the focal point of everything in the closing minutes of the program, the focus was then immediately taken away from them so they could draw attention to the Undertaker-Kane feud. Because did I mention, we need to make sure we cram in as much as possible into 2 hours. Can never let anything have room to breathe. That all said, I think we all at least are moderately aware of what this is all leading to with Shawn, Hunter, and Rude. The first incarnation of DX, which oddly enough is the one people often neglect because it was so fleeting. That initial trio, if you want to call it that. It really didn't last all that long. Rude was around the WWF for a couple months, right? The big thing people remember with Rude was him making the duplicate appearances on Raw and Nitro the same night. Because they taped Raw in advance. So you see Rude on Raw doing the pre-taped angle or whatever it was with DX. By that point, he'd already been sporting the full beard on television. And then he ends up appearing on Nitro Live that same night with a mustache. Pretty similar to what he looked like when he showed up here. But now as a member of the NWO. Or whatever he was for the group. A consultant. A bodyguard. I don't even remember the story. Actually, if I recall, wasn't it that he appeared on Nitro first? And then they showed him on Raw later on because Raw was taped the previous week? That's right. Because that's why it's so memorable. Because Rude just magically reappeared on Raw with a full beard after people had already seen him on Nitro with a mustache. So everyone's like, how did this fucker appear on both shows and have completely different looks? Oh, by that point, the cat was already out of the bag. And I forget what the terms of agreement were, but I know Rude never officially wrestled during his run here in '97. What do they call it? Some kind of Lloyds of London deal. It was basically the agreement that because of the back injury that ended his career several years prior, he could still be involved in wrestling without being physically active. Because that was the caveat. By law, the deal meant that Rude couldn't be physically active in a ring ever again. Elsewise, the Lloyds of London thing would be breached and he'd end up owing on a settlement. It was a very weird loophole. I think Curt Hennig had one too, didn't he? But if you go back and look, whether Rude was involved with DX or the NWO, he never wrestled in matches. As far as I know, I don't think he ever took a bump. Because again, that would have been a breach in his deal. And there's a lot that we'll cover when it comes to the whole Rick Rude DX thing. To say that he wasn't a fan of it, It's probably a mild way of putting it. It always seemed like a very odd fit. A square peg in a round hole type situation. Rick Rude being affiliated with Hunter and Shawn. It just never clicked. No pun intended. And as we'll see, there's a reason Rude did not last long in the WWF. It wasn't just because of all the Montreal stuff. Trust me. All things being equal, show's definitely not as terrible as some of the Raws we've covered in recent times. Bad material notwithstanding, I at least got through this one without wanting to punch a hole through my monitor. I mean, the bad material was always ever present. You know exactly when a Russo segment is on your television screen. Thankfully, this is still when McMahon was filtering out a lot of the bad Russo material. So we haven't been subjugated to 2 straight hours of nonstop crash TV yet. But like I said, this will be the final Retro Raw report for at least the remainder of the month. I know the WWF is usually preempted during Labor Day weekend, so we might actually not be missing out on a whole lot between now and the September pay-per-view. Hopefully by that point I'll be back in town so we can just hit the ground running and jump right into the pay-per-view recap. Proceeding as normal with the review series. I'm more so looking forward to the month of October, because that's where things really get good. Fingers crossed. Anywho, we'll wrap it up on that note. Should be a few weeks, like I said, but I can't ever make predictions, especially in the field I'm in. But folks, if you happen to stumble across this one on YouTube, regardless of shadow banning techniques, just subscribe, comment, leave a like, get the engagement going, try to build up as much as you can to get some notoriety going on this channel. Things are not looking good, but I'm just trying to push through and see if something ends up capturing the algorithm's attention. But until then, I'll catch you guys soon, and we'll reconvene in a few weeks. Thanks all. Take care and peace out.